Hello, my fellow readers. This is iDarkSymphony777 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story, and finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the story I am doing a review of is called Shayla's Story. It is a two-part Yu-Gi-Oh! Story written by Dima G. Gall. And I actually, before I get into the review, I will say I do have a soft spot for this story, despite the fact it's completely atrocious. So, let's start, oh boy, with the plot. The plot actually starts at the beginning of Duelist Kingdom. We actually, surprisingly, we don't get a lot of fanfiction that focus on the events of Duelist Kingdom. He mostly just skips to Battle City. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And the story follows a girl named various names. It eventually settles on Shayla, who is a really cool concept. And if there's one saving grace to this entire story, it's the main character, despite the fact that everything else is bad. Everything else is so bad. Named, and what she is she's a blind Christian Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. And I think that's such a wacky concept. Just that combination. It's like, she's blind, she, as in blind, she literally can't see. She's Christian, she's very faithful to God, and all that jazz, and she plays Yu-Gi-Oh! And she does, like, a lot of, and, her character, I'll talk more about her character, because she's really the only character we're going to talk about when we get to there. But the story actually follows her throughout Duelist Kingdom, and then the sequel throughout the beginnings of Battle City. She's basically she's just doing this to take a vacation. She only really she was part of a group home. She got a letter to join Duelist Kingdom. She doesn't know why, because she wasn't in any tournaments. She doesn't really know that much how to play. So, she just thought, I'll just do this as a way to just get away from the group home for a little bit, just to take a vacation. And then what happens is she's kind of wrapped up in all the shadow games with the Millennium items and all that jazz. She meets up with Yugi and Joey and all that. She does help out with Kaiba, and all that. There's just not much. There's not much context to the story, to the plot, because, quite honestly, it's just most of the story kind of revolves around Shayla as a character. But for those of you who know what the actual plot of, if you never watched the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, Duelist Kingdom happens when Maximilian Pegasus uses the power of his Millennium Eye, which is actually in his eye. If you actually look up Maximilian Pegasus, you actually see, like, he has, like, pink hair and covers up, like, half his face, because he used the hair to actually block out the Millennium Eye. And what the Millennium Eye does is allows him to read his opponent's mind. So he can use it to cheat at Yu-Gi-Oh! So that way he can actually see their hand. Maximilian Pegasus wants to get all the Millennium items to basically resurrect his dead wife. So he steals Yugi's grandfather's soul, so that way he can actually go, so he can get Yugi to go to Duelist Kingdom to try and get the puzzle back. And so basically, that's Duelist Kingdom. It's just Yugi showing up at the island, wanting to get his grandfather's soul back, and having to deal with, like, eliminators and stuff like that. And stuff like that. It's really hard to talk about the plot in the first story, since Shayla, for the most part, just stays in, like, an empty area and mostly just watches duels happen. So there's not... So in terms of plot, specifically just in the first story, there's not really a lot happening that doesn't really separate itself from the events of Duelist Kingdom. There is a thing that she actually wants to drop out, because it's like the moment she realizes all this magic and and Hui, she thinks is all a cult, so it's like, I don't want to deal with this. Fuck this shit, I'm out. And then it turns out she has a Millennium item, specifically the Millennium Scales. So, and the Millennium Scales says at times of great injustice will basically allow her to see sight. So the scales will actually use their powers to basically get rid of Shayla's legitimate blindness and basically allow her to see. It actually is a really neat idea of just the scales using their magic to basically use Shayla as an avatar just by removing her eyesight and allowing her to just basically fix that injustice and help and basically uphold balance and stuff like that. And there's a neat moment near the end where, you know, she first gets her eyesight back, and it's a shadow duel between Yugi and Pegasus. Yugi beat Pegasus, and so Shayla's like, I can see, and she's like trying to figure, and while Yugi and Pegasus, well, Yami and Pegasus are doing like the super serious stare down, like talking shit to each other, Shayla's just off to the side like, I can see, and then as she looks at Yami, it's like, Yugi. Yes, Yugi. And then she looks at Kaiba and it's like, Kaiba. And Kaiba's like, can you... And Kaiba's actually yelling at Yami and Pegasus like, can you get me down from here? He's like chained up. And then like actually Shayla walks up to him and it's like, you're Kaiba. He said, yes, I'm Kaiba. Can you get me down from here? It's like, sure. And Kaiba actually helps her out because Shayla is like, you know, since she was blind from birth, she doesn't really know anything about most things. She doesn't know left from right, and you know, colors. It's like there's a moment it's like, well, don't get my lockpick. It's like, okay, it's in my left pocket, and Shayla's actually like, and it's really realistic in how it presents the plot of Shayla as being blind, because you know when she gets her eyesight, she actually doesn't know much of anything, so she really doesn't know if she doesn't really know because she wasn't taught. Again, she was in a group home, she wasn't really taught anything, and she's like, and even Kaiba kind of says, were you blind as a kid? And Shayla actually calls him out on it by saying, yes, I was actually blind until like a minute ago. And that actually, you know, shuts Kaiba up completely. And Kaiba's like, that pocket. And so, you know, she goes in the pocket. She finds the pocket. She pulls out two wallets. One is red, one is blue. And you know, being blind, she doesn't know anything about colors. It's like it's in the blue, it's in the red one. And she's like trying to figure out which one is red and which one blue. And Kaiba's like, oh, no. And then he realizes she's still blind. She was legitimately blind. It's like the one that hand. She got it. You know, she actually, you know, and she, you know, she's trying to figure everything out. It's actually kind of cute how the story presents her, and her being blind is actually treated as very realistic. Like the author goes 9 yards. The very first chapter has her actually leave the boat, and it kind of gives us all the clues that she's blind. Like the author at the beginning, when everyone's getting off the boat to Duelist Kingdom, you know, she rises slowly, like she walks slowly. She's actually holding her hand out to like walls and the railings, basically how blind people navigate a new area, so that they can try and get used to everything around them. And then when she gets off the boat, she digs into her backpack for her walking stick, and she basically, you know, goes through that. All her Yu-Gi-Oh cards are actually written in 3D printer marker, which I actually, before reading the story the second time for this review, I actually didn't know existed in real life. That's actually really cool that I learned something new from this story, that 3D printer markers actually exist. And again, it kind of carries around into the whole of presenting Shayla as basically this badass blind duelist who's kind of mentally broken and trying to find her way because she was bullied all her life, And that kind of carries into the fact that, Kaiba actually starts getting feelings for her and wanting to help her despite the fact that she's actually blind. And the first story ends with, like, the Millennium item basically making her blind again. Shayla actually challenging Pegasus to a duel because Pegasus actually tries to pull a fast one because he realizes that, Shayla's there. I don't really have to do anything. Basically, after Yami beat Pegasus, he summons the Shadow Realm. He realizes Shayla's trying to get Pegasus free. Pegasus actually tries to take Shayla's soul. Realize, like, why can't I take your soul? Which actually leads to, like, a pretty badass one. It's like, I already gave my soul to God. It's like, alright. I challenge you to a duel. I think that's actually kind of an unintentionally hilarious moment, like Pegasus realizing, shit, I can't take her soul. Does she have no soul? It's like, no, I already gave my soul away. There's a man upstairs. Aha. That presents a problem. I challenge you to a duel. And of course, Pegasus tries to read Shayla's mind. The scales interfere, rendering her blind. So that way, because she's blind and she has to do everything by field, Pegasus can't really read her mind. It's actually it's a creative workaround to negate Pegasus's mind reading abilities. I think it's neat. And the story ends with them going where Shayla actually gets adopted by Mai unofficially, and kind of leaves her close friend behind her because he has to go back to the group home, and Mai can only really take one person, so Shayla decides to go with Mai. Story has Mai and Shayla kind of hanging out with Mai, trying to help her out and get her enrolled in school and give her an education, help her with all these things. Mai's being like cool, like the big sis that Shayla wanted. Pegasus actually wants to finish the events of Duelist Kingdom, so he basically adds like an actual like mini tournament of several people who are competing in Duelist Kingdom. The basically is like, well, no one, because of everything that happened with Duelist Kingdom, I'm gonna throw in the invite to anyone to like a local tournament that I'll be hosting to basically test the groundwork for eventually Battle City. And Kaiba watches the whole thing. He wants Shayla to win because because of the simple fact that he kind of appreciated the fact that in Duelist Kingdom Shayla actually went out of her way to basically help him when she didn't really need to. With everything happening, she's like, I just don't want to deal with this shit, so I'm gonna help you. Mai wins the tournament again. All the finalists were actually given free passes, so probably Mako Tsunami was there, stuff like that. We're also introduced in the first story. We're introduced to a character named Drake, who's like Pegasus' son. Phenomenally, like he's an OC, and his girlfriend. Then Kaiba literally decides to announce, I'm doing the Battle City tournament. Everyone's invited. Some characters actually were given. Shayla was specifically given a special invite by Kaiba, saying, as basically it's implied to be a gesture, a combination of a gesture of good fate because he's seen her duel, and he thought, despite the fact she never really competed for a tournament, she's good enough that I'll let her through on my recommendation, and also the fact Kaiba has a crush on her. She's introduced to Ishizu later in the story. I'll get to that in a little bit. And it's basically just a bunch of stuff happening. This is the second story is where the plot completely falls apart. It's just she gets involved in all the Rare Hunter Merrick shenanigans. She doesn't want anything to do with this. She actually dropped out of the tournament, but since Mai's still competing, she actually goes with Mai to kind of be her cheerleader and stuff like that. And then we get to the finals. Pretty much most of the stuff with the finals happen. We are given an introduction to Shayla actually being a descendant of a little slave girl in ancient Egypt who was training under the original Siju and the modern day the reincarnation of Siju kind of helping her out and stuff like that. And the story ends with Kaiba, trying and struggling to figure out everything that's going on with his feelings with Shayla. And Shayla, since she's blind, she's able to sense the magic, and there's something's gone wrong, which would be a cliffhanger for the virtual world and the remainder of the Battle City tournament. Oh, that's a mess of a plot if I ever said one. It's a real catastrophe. But Duelist Kingdom, there's not much of a plot because she's really much a bystander in the grand scheme of things, so there's not really much of a plot except for the events of Duelist Kingdom. She does get a little more involved in Battle City, but by and large, that's when it actually starts to fall apart because instead of doing something, the author just decides to flounder around with just everything going on instead of trying to make a clear, concise story. It's really confusing. She does get separated and spend a lot of time with Kaiba in Battle City, so it's fine. Characters. It's just Shayla. I mean, again, like I said earlier, there's one saving grace in the story. It's Shayla herself. I like Shayla as a character. For how badly the author bungles everything else, the presentation and the character of Shayla is phenomenal. Nowhere near the best OC. She's nowhere near that. But the way she's written and the way she's presenting of her, basically, in the beginning of Duelist Kingdom, she basically changes her name because it's revealed that her parents abandoned her when they found out that she was blind. They didn't want to take care of a blind child, so they just basically threw her on the ground, put her in a basket, and give her to a group home. And so she struggles. She's been struggling to figure out her path in life, what she wants to do, because she doesn't even know her name. So, and in the sequel, we're actually given flashbacks of her actually and each flashback where it points to her, she has a different name. So that kind of that leverages out into the situation that she's in. She's actually very savvy. Her Yu-Gi-Oh deck's basically just a bunch of female monsters. It's fine. Duelist Kingdom in the beginning of Battle City, we didn't have much archetypes, so it's not it's not real. It's not unrealistic that her deck is just a bunch of random monsters, because that's how most Duelist Kingdom decks did things. The only proper archetypes in Duelist Kingdom were Mai's Harpies and Pegasus' Tunes. That was it. Why was it? And I guess you could say Dark Magician, because Yugi had a bunch of cards that specifically had to have Dark Magician in them. That's fine. But yeah, seeing Shayla, seeing all this, feeling all this magic because she's blind, and it's actually... Okay, let's start with the presentation of her as a blind character. Like I said, the presentation of her as a blind character is very realistic. If you ever met a blind person and you watch how they act and how they do things, and you read this story, it's very realistic. I will have to say the author did her research on properly portraying a very realistic case for a blind person. There's a lot of subtle stuff, she feels as you're it's very common knowledge, if you lose an actual scent, the rest of your sense will actually get stronger. That's the whole basis of the comic book character Daredevil. He lost sight, and so all of his other sights basically just got supercharged. That's basically the case with Shayla here. She basically feels everything. Everything is kind of described. Everything when she's kind of described by feel or by scent or by hearing. It's very surprisingly portrayed, but at the same time, it's not. I'll explain in a little bit. She goes from like a sort of betrayer, a sort of dispenser of justice, because she goes by the name of Justice at the beginning. Of her just wanting to be like a nod to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, like her asking the 3 questions on a little bridge in the middle of nowhere, and her learning the rules. Everyone's reactions to her, like being blind, is actually kind of different. Some of them are like, "Oh shit, you're blind? This would be too easy to like." Yugi kind of like, "Oh, you're blind." It's like, "Well, that's actually really," and Yugi in the game kind of actually seeing her cards and realizing that's pretty ingenious. To my just completely being flippant, it's like, okay. Like, I don't care. Like, oh, okay. So it's a neat touch that shows that even with everything else being horrible, the author did a lot of proper research on how to write a blind character well. Like, it is a really good example of how to write a character like this immaculately well. Like, that's saying something, because that's the only praise I'm gonna give this story. And having her, dispense the justice, and then she kind of realizes she's wrapped up in this whole shenanigans. Is like, nope, not dealing with any of this, and trying to deliberately nope out of there is actually pretty hilarious. It is, but it also fits someone who, who's very religious in nature. Like, a lot of religious people don't believe in the whole idea of magic. Despite the fact in the Yu-Gi-Oh world, magic is very much real. Anime, what do you expect? It's an anime about people killing each other over a children's card game. What do you expect there to be magic? Do you expect there to not be magic in there? Not a chance. And and then there's her friendship with Mai. And then there's her kind of weird relationship with Kaiba. And similar to the first story, the second story, the author at least keeps her story, her character consistent with her wanting to do this she only really joins Battle City because Mai kind of convinced her to join. But Shayla's like, I don't really want to. But Mei's like, come on, we can have some fun. We can go on a relaxing thing and just have some fun. And hey, and even Mai tells Shayla, it's like, hey, if you don't want to actually compete, you can just be the cheerleader. And Mai eventually convinces Shayla to at least give it a shot. So she's like, that's fine. That's fine. And her character is at least consistent. I will at least give it that. Again, it kind of borders on the fact that, it's called back to the first story where she finds out about the rare hunters. She finds out that, hey, that's like magic. I'm not getting involved. There's also a really neat meta hilarity in the fact that if you don't remember Battle City, if you've never seen the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, because the anime actually comes out first and then the manga, so that's actually unique among animes, and the fact of the mangas usually come first and the animes adapt the manga, but Yu-Gi-Oh is actually the opposite. The manga actually adopts what it does from the anime, so Yu-Gi-Oh is actually very unique in that regard. So one of the duels that happens, I think the very first duel of the Battle City tournament that happens, is Yugi versus a guy named Seeker. And Seeker uses an Exodia deck, so he actually has a lot of fraudulent, fake versions of Exodia, and he has like a lot of multiple copies. He has like 3 copies of each, and basically has like a strategy to basically stall out while he draws the Exodia pieces. And this kind of I guess would be the perfect segue into the consistency issues with the story. Because, okay, so I'm gonna actually go to, because, let's see, let me see if I can, because I'm trying to actually, okay. I actually had to go to chapter 13, where the Duelist Secret actually takes place, because okay, so how do I explain this right? Duelist Kingdom and Battle City have two completely different rule sets, and they play completely different. Like, Duelist Kingdom, the best way I can describe Duelist Kingdom is you can get away with whatever you want if you can bullshit enough. Like, everyone remembers the moment where, if you ever watch Duelist Kingdom, there's a moment where Yami duels a guy named Mako Tsunami, and Mako has like these underwater monsters that are hidden underwater, so Yugi can't even see them or even try to fight them. And at the end, he has only 2 cards on the field. He has a giant soldier of stone and what's called the Silver Moon, which is a continuous spell in the anime. What Yami does is, sorry about that. My family started arguing in the background, and I was worried the mic might fit up. So where was I? Oh yeah, the duel with Mako Tsunami. So Yami only has a giant soldier of stone and a silver moon on his side of the field. And the soldier of stone is like on this little piece of rock surrounded by the water monsters. So what Yami does is he switches giant soldier of stone to attack mode. Mako's like kind of calling him out. It's like, why are you switching my attack mode? You can't attack my monsters. And then Yugi, in the most hammy way, thanks to Dan Green, goes, I'm not going to attack your monsters. I attack the moon! Which leads to the Soldier of Stone actually pulling out one of his rocks, looking up at Yugi's own moon card, and plunging its sword right into it, basically breaking the moon off. All the pieces of the moon crashing into the holographic memories and basically beaching all the water, killing all the Mako's cards, and winning Yami. It's literal bullshit. That's a perfect example of how to literally bullshit your way to victory. That's just what do. That is complete and utter nonsense. But yeah, that perfectly eclipses, the level of bullshit in Duelist Kingdom. Battle City has some bullshit moments too. Like, there's a memorable moment that introduces the Dark Magician Girl in Yami's duel against Arcana. Arcana activates Dark Magical Curtain, which he pays half life points to special summon Dark Magician. However, Yami says, "Oh, you can actually activate both. If you activate Dark Magical Curtain, both players can use it." And Arcana is like, "Wait a minute, you don't have a dark... Wait, your Dark Magician's in the graveyard." Said, "Who said anything about a Dark Magician? Aha! I summon the Dark Magician Girl! And I play her face down." I couldn't resist saying the meme. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't make you sweaty. You clearly never seen the Dark Magician Girl. And her gigantic boobs that were censored in the TCG because they were afraid of big boobs. And yet they're changing all that now. Oh, God! Even worse when you think of, like, the Harpy Ladies, because the Harpy Ladies were, like, dominatrix in the original manga. Not joking. I'm literally not joking on that. They had whips. They had like armor that equips them. That was literally called cyber bondage in the OCG. Look that up. I am not joking with that. And also their nipples also had spikes. on the armor. I'm not joking about that. Look that up. I shit you not. I dare you. I double dare you. Look that up. You will be proven wrong if you even think of bullshitting your way saying, no, there's no way the nipples has, oh my god, why are the nipples have spikes? But yeah. Going back to Seeker and the consistency issues. The author actually has a note in the second story about consistency. I have one complaint about Yu-Gi-Oh, and that is inconsistency with cards. I have played three of the games: Forbidden Memories, Dark Duelist Story, and Eternal Duelist Soul, and half the time the Magic, Trap, and Monster cards do different things. I like consistency, even if means I am going to be inaccurate with a few cards. What does that mean? What does it have to do with anything? Well, I am keeping all power-ups and power-downs in groups of 500 or 1,000. I'm also going to keep the cards the way I had them. Example, Electro Whip really powers up electric types, but in the first 2 games, it works on female monsters. Since I already used it on female monsters, it's going to stay with female monsters. Got it. That's enough talk on with the thing. That's what the author so says. The problem is the author makes this big deal about consistency and then goes out of her way to basically be as inconsistent as possible with what's going on. Like, that's kind of weird. Because you have what's essentially the Duelist Kingdom, the Battle City duels playing out exactly like the Duelist Kingdom. There's actually an actual real world reason why they kind of play completely different. It's because, if you don't know, Takahashi, the person who created Yu-Gi-Oh, wasn't expecting the card game idea to take off. Basically, the original idea of Yu-Gi-Oh was Yu-Gi-Moto would find the Millennium Puzzle, and it had a kind of nefarious dark spirit, the Pharaoh, inside of it, who would dispense justice. And so what he'd do, he'd play a shadow game with various forms of different types of games. So it's like, it wasn't even just card games, it was just any game. So my favorite one was this guy was going around stealing money. It was very greedy. And so what the Pharaoh did was, I challenged you to a game, and he actually would explain the rules. It's like, there is a shoe, here's a shoe, and it's full of quarters. But also, in the shoe is a very dangerous scorpion who will sting you. And so each of us reaches into the shoe, takes the coin out of the shoe, without trying to get stung by the scorpion. Whoever has the most coins at the end, when the shoe's empty, wins. And this actually goes normally, and how the duels would go, and how these challenges would go is, Yami would basically manipulate luck to his benefit, or if he couldn't manipulate luck, he would basically prey on his opponent's inherent weaknesses. So there's a part where, with the shoe thing, the guy was actually getting nervous because they were both taking out coins, and he didn't know how many coins were in there. So he politely asked the Pharaoh, it's like, are we allowed to take out more than one coin out of the shoe? And Yami flat out says, like, yeah, there's no rule against that. You can do that as long as you can actually get your hand out of the shoe without the scorpion stealing you. You can take as many coins as you want. The guy gets greedy, reaches his hand, grabs all the coins, but what happens is he can't, because he has all the coins, and his hand is actually stuck to the shoe. And then he gets stung, he loses the game, and he dies. So basically, his own greed got the better of him. And basically, Yami, by fairly explaining the rules, because the chapter did explain that it didn't say anything about not taking more than one coin. So, Yami actually basically wasn't even manipulating anything. He just said, yeah, you can do that. What happened was, So what happened when it came to the card game was there was an arc called Death Tea, which was the arc that introduced us to Seto Kaiba. And so basically, Yami and Taya and everyone would have to go up to the tower because Kaiba took, just like in the anime, Kaiba took Yugi's grandfather. If you actually watch the very first episode of the Yugi anime, you can actually find that on YouTube. Like, you can actually find this episode on YouTube. The very first episode is actually an adaptation of the finale of the Death Tea arc. So that's actually really cool. And so the duel actually progressed the same way, with Yugi actually winning with Exodia. But in the manga, Yami basically kills Kaiba. Like, Yami basically puts Kaiba in a coma, and I think eventually Kaiba does. I think Kaiba eventually wakes up. I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, because what happened was the fan base became so attached with the idea of the card game. And I mean everyone in Japan, if the manga ever reached outside Japan, people love the idea of the card game. Even Takahashi's own friends and people and his staff loved the idea of the card game so much that Takahashi rebooted the Yu-Gi-Oh manga to be exclusively about the card game. But he was still trying to hammer out the rules, hence which explains Duelist Kingdom. Takahashi was still trying to hammer out all the rules and stuff like that, and hence why the specific games that the author mentioned, Forbidden Memories, Dark Duelist Story, and Eternal Duelist Soul, are based around the Duelist Kingdom rules. But when Battle City happened, we were introduced. So not only the anime was introduced to they would eventually become the actual rules of the game, like special summoning and tribute and stuff like that with traps and magic. The TCG and the official Yu-Gi-Oh rules were established, and basically everything you read about Yu-Gi-Oh came specifically from Duelist Kingdom, which kind of bleeds into the consistency issue, where the author writes the Battle City duels like Duelist Kingdom, despite the fact they are completely different things. They are purposely meant to be completely different things. So in the name of trying to be consistent, the author inadvertently shoots themselves in the foot by making it inconsistent. It kind of becomes inconsistent in a roundabout way. And that really screws over the sequel. It's this consistency issue that makes the sequel so bad. And that really hurts, because, yeah, the first story gets a pass with that, because it's Duelist Kingdom. You basically it's literally just make it up. Just make up as much bullshit as you want. But with Battle City, there is set rules, there is officially things, like, probably the most problematic one is the one that the author still uses trap cards as magic cards. And that makes no sense unless, one, it's a quick play, or specifically, if you ever watched the Battle City tournament and you saw the duel between Yugi and Kaiba actually plays a spell card, which is a continue that actually allows them to use all spell cards, not only as quick play spells, but also from their hand. So it's like, during your opponent's turn, you can use your spell cards from your hand during their turn, if you want it. Basically, if you play the TCG game, then probably say something like Magical Musketeers, or more recently, the Mist-Rune archetype. Basically, they would play like that then, just without all the milling with Mist-Runes. And also Todd Howard doing like a little ditty dance with the Wabbajack from Chalk Eaters. But yeah, that brings in such a huge, horrible wave of trying to be consistent, but completely ruining it, because the whole point of Battle City is supposed to establish a actual rule set in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe, because the rest of the duels past Duelist Kingdom, are basically played similar to Battle City. Like, the only thing that's different from Battle City is fusion monsters cannot attack the turn they're summoned. That's literally the only unique thing about Battle City from everything else. They're still bullshitting, but not as much bullshitting as Duelist Kingdom. And that really, really hurts, because it's so cringe reading My Valentine still doing like the whole using like Electro Whip during her opponent's turn while they're attacking. It makes no sense. It makes it super inconsistent in a way that the author's trying to bring consistency. It only makes sense if you actually play the card. Let me just say this. It's way too fast. The first story makes sense. She's really with the consistency not only of the duels but the story itself. The first story is fine. It's very fast paced because, again, half of the story Shayla's just a bystander, so it skips a lot of stuff, and it's really just a duel that happens and some conversation. It's fine. It's just way too fast. It's fine for what it is. Second story, it rushes through everything. And with how it's written, it's just really, really awkward. Grammar. Let's just move on to the grammar errors. Grammar is bad. There's so many bad grammar errors. First off, I don't know what the author was thinking when the authors decided to call Joey, Joey, as Joe. So it's like, throughout the entire story, you were calling Joey Joe. Really weird. Really? Oh wait, I forgot to go back. I just realized I forgot to go back to the Seeker example. I want to at least mention this. Going back to the consistency for just 1 second, because I was ranting so much about the inconsistent stuff that I completely forgot what the point of talking about bringing up Seeker. So, if you never played Yu-Gi-Oh for long enough, because I've been a Yu-Gi-Oh player since the very beginning. I'm an OG. I've been playing at this point for 21 years. Exodia is limited to 1 copy. But the thing is, no one acknowledges it in universe except for Shayla. So when Yugi's dueling Seeker, it's like, I have 3 copies each of each Exodia piece. And like, Shayla actually mumbles from the sidelines, like, wait, everyone, I thought it was like legally allowed, like, everyone to only have like 1 copy. Like, yeah, but what's with the what? And the reason I bring this specific incident up is because I think this is the biggest example of trying to force a consistency and making it inconsistent. Because having 3 pieces of Exodia was never mentioned. First off. Second off, the fact that out of everything here, the author decides to bring up the real world rules specifically with Exodia? Of all things? Like, this is just a weird time to be actually talking about the actual rules of the card game, because you're playing the game because you're following the consistency on the card games that are based off the rules of the manga, and then you randomly bring up the actual ban list in a random throwaway duel. That is so weird. Like, that's legitimately just out of nowhere. Like, Like, it's just random. It's like, why would, like, ban cards and having multiple cards per thing was actually never really a thing, except for Mai having multiple copies of Harpy Lady, because that's how her deck worked in the anime. And so randomly bringing up having multiple copies of Exodia, just completely out of the blue, without like no explanation. It's just, it's trying to be consistent in all the wrong ways. Like, because if you were gonna mention, if you wanted to try so hard to put the ban list, because if there's actually a website that shows all the entire ban list, Exodia was one of the very first cards put on that list to one copy for each piece. Why would it matter if you're still playing by Duelist Kingdom rules and then you randomly bring up the ban list from the real life card game? You see what I mean? That makes no sense. If you had Kaiba mention the ban list, like, oh, there's gonna be introducing a ban list, like you can only have certain copies of like the really powerful cards, like stuff like Exodia. Like, he uses Exodia as an example because he lost to Exodia. You only have one copy, and then Seeker announces he has multiple copies because the rare hunters, their whole shtick is they cheat. Then fine, Shayla would have every single right to call him out on it. But Yami wouldn't care because he's gonna kick his ass anyway, because that's what happens in the anime. Then it would make sense. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Grammar errors. There's so many. Besides the calling him Joe, continuously inconsistent with Mai's name, constantly calls Yugi with the hyphen, which is fucking retarded. There's a point, and I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not a grammar Nazi, but there comes a point where even I have to call the bullshit. This is just too far. I get the fact that the anime's name is called U-G-O, as in Yu-Gi-Oh, or if you want to shorten it, YGO. Yugi's name is spelled without the hyphen. Like, was it that hard to just go on a wiki and just look up their names? Or hell, just use their Japanese names. Like, just call them, excuse me. Constantly calls the Millennium items Millennial items, which is incredibly dumb. Is very inconsistent with like some of the names of the monsters. Constantly, it just so half the time doesn't have quotation marks, so stuff that should be dialogue isn't put as dialogue, as in with like the quotation marks. It is a just gigantic mess in just grammar and sentence structure and pacing and plot. It's like, why is this so bad? And yet I still have a genuine soft spot for this story. I can't fully hate this story. At least I can't. I honestly can't. I'm not recommending this story. That can go fuck itself. Way too fast-paced in the second story. Way too inconsistent with the author trying to be inconsistent, but doing it in the entirely wrong way. Way too many grammar errors. The plot is completely half-assed. The only good thing about the story is the main character herself, Shayla. She is a really good character, and she's written in a very realistic way for what's essentially a blind character. But that's it. One single good character does not make a good story. It can't, no matter how hard you try. What would be my favorite What would be my favorite part? I would have to say probably her telling Pegasus that my God has my soul. Because I think that's actually a pretty epic moment, all things considered. And all the mess with like the latter half of the first story. That's at least a genuine badass moment of just Pegasus getting bitch slapped by God. Which means, and as someone who played Yu-Gi-Oh! For a long time, Shayla played Solemn Judgment on her. Pretend this is Solemn Judgment! Pretend! Despite the fact it's a melodious fusion. Ignore that. Pretend! But, yeah, I can't recommend this. And that's... But I do, like I said, I do like the whole, just Shayla. 51 minutes. Good grief. This review is actually going to be different because I'm going to do something I only did once before for this story and split it into two parts. If you notice, I didn't say what would I change because I wanted to give this story justice, and it's going to take a while to properly give this story justice. And I'm going to dedicate an entire video just to what I would fix. Because unlike other stories where it's just one thing you'd have to fix, I would have to literally rework 3 entire stories from the ground up. This is not like several other stories where it's just, just change this, or a minor thing, or even like the last time where I kind of rebuilt a whole story from the ground up, which was like a Starlit Duck story, which was the one where Roy went through Celia's memories, where for the most part I just kept most of it same, but just added more details to it. But no, with this one, I have to rework the entire thing from the ground up. Just scorched earth. And the last time I did something like this was when I did Angseth, which is a Metroid fanfiction. And even then, the second half was split between going more into depth on the third act, because that story followed a traditional 3-act format, and then trying to fix specifically just the third act. But in order to have to do that, I had to make it a second part. They kind of more go in depth on what was wrong with specifically just the third act to kind of showcase what I meant by like being completely different. So you'll be seeing this one. So both ones will actually be coming. Both this one and part 2 will be coming out in a couple days, around the same time. I will see you then. So this has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.